and welcome to Bookspot. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of The Star Beast by Robert Heinlein. Poor Lummox, the star beast in question, is going to have to appear in court. Rather more to the point as far as human law is concerned, so does his owner Johnny. Chapter 3. An Improper Question. The intervention by the Department of Spatial Affairs in the case of Lummox did not postpone the hearing. It speeded it up. Mr. Greenberg phoned the district judge, asked for the use of his courtroom, and asked him to have all parties and witnesses in court at 10 o'clock the next morning, including, of course, the extraterrestrial that was the center of the fuss. Judge O'Farrell questioned the last point. "This creature, you need him too?" Greenberg said that he most decidedly wanted the ET present, since his connection with the case was the reason for the intervention. "Judge, we people in depth space don't like to butt into your local affairs. After I've had a look at the creature and asked half a dozen questions, I can probably bow out, which will suit us both. This alleged ET is my only reason for coming out, so have the beastie present, will you?" He's rather too large to bring into the courtroom. I haven't seen him for several years, and I understand he has grown a bit. But he would have been too large to bring indoors even then. Couldn't you look at him where he is?" "Possibly, though I admit to a prejudice for having everything pertinent to a hearing in one spot. Where is he?" "Penned up where he lives, with his owner. They have a suburban place a few miles out." Greenberg thought about it. Although a modest man who cared not where he ate or slept, when it came to depth space business, he operated on the rule of making the other fellow do the running around. Otherwise, the department's tremendous load of business would never get done. "I would like to avoid that trip out into the country, as I intend to hold my ship and get back to Capitol tomorrow afternoon, if possible. It's rather urgent, a matter of a Martian treaty." This last was Greenberg's standard fib for when he wanted to hurry someone not in the department. Judge O'Farrell said that he would arrange it. "We'll rig a temporary pen on the lawn outside the courthouse." "Swell. See you tomorrow, Judge. Thanks for everything." Judge O'Farrell had been on a fishing trip 2 days earlier when Lummox had gone for his walk. The damage had been cleaned up by his return, and as a fixed principle, he avoided hearing or reading news reports or chit-chat concerning cases he might have to try. When he phoned Chief of Safety Dressier, he expected no difficulty about moving Lummox. Chief Dressier went through the roof. "Judge, are you out of your head?" "Hey, what's ailing you, Deacon?" Dressier tried to explain. The judge shrugged off his objections, whereupon they both phoned the mayor. But the mayor had been on the same fishing trip. He threw his weight on O'Farrell's side. His words were, "Chief, I'm surprised at you. We can't have an important Federation official thinking our little city is so backwoods we can't handle a small thing like that." Dressier groaned and called the Mountain State Steel and Welding Works. Chief Dressier decided to move Lummox before daylight, as he wished to get him penned up before the streets were crowded. But nobody had thought to notify John Thomas. He was awakened at 4 a.m. with a sickening shock. The wakening had interrupted a nightmare. He believed at first that something dreadful had happened to Lummox. Once the situation was clear, he was non-cooperative. He was a slow starter, one of those individuals with a low morning blood sugar count who is worth nothing until after a hearty breakfast, which he now insisted on. Chief Dressier looked angry. Mrs. Stewart looked Mother Knows Best and said, "Now, dear, don't you think you had better—" "I'm going to have my breakfast, and Lummox, too." Dressier said, "Young man, you don't have the right attitude. First thing you know, you'll be in even worse trouble. Come along, you can get breakfast downtown." John Thomas looked stubborn. His mother said sharply, "John Thomas, I won't have it, do you hear? You're being difficult, just like your father was." The reference to his father rubbed him even more the wrong way. He said bitterly, "Why don't you stand up for me, Mum? They taught me in school that a citizen can't be snatched out of his home any time a policeman gets a notion, but you seem anxious to help him instead of me. Whose side are you on?" She stared at him astounded, as he had a long record of docile obedience. "John Thomas, you can't speak to your mother that way." "Yes," agreed Dressier. Be polite to your mother, or I'll give you the back of my hand. Unofficially, of course. And there's one thing I can't abide, it's a boy who's rude to his elders. He unbuttoned his tunic, pulled out a folded paper. Sergeant Mendoza told me about the quibble you pulled the other day, so I came prepared. There's my warrant. Now, will you come, or will I drag you? He stood there, slapping the paper against his palm, but did not offer it to John Thomas. But when John Thomas reached for it, he let him have it and waited while he read it. At last Dressier said, "Well, are you satisfied?" "This is a court order," John Thomas said, "telling me to appear and requiring me to bring Lummox." "It certainly is. But it says 10 o'clock. It doesn't say I can't eat breakfast first as long as I'm there by 10. The chief took a deep breath, expanding visibly. His face, already pink, got red, but he did not answer. John Thomas said, "Mom, I'm going to fix my breakfast. Shall I fix some for you too?" She glanced at Dressier, then back at her son, and bit her lip. "Never mind," she said grudgingly. "I'll get breakfast. Mr. Dressier, will you have coffee with us?" "Eh? That's kind of you, ma'am. I don't mind if I do. I've been up all night." John Thomas looked at them. "I'll run out and take a quick look at Lummox." He hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry I was rude, Mom." "We'll say no more about it, then," she said coldly. He had been intending to say several things in self-justification, but he thought better of it and left. Lummox was snoring gently, stretched half in and half out of his house. His sentry eye was raised above his neck, as it always was when he slept. It swiveled around at John Thomas's approach and looked him over, but that portion of Lummox that stood guard for the rest recognized the youth. The star creature did not wake. Satisfied, John Thomas went back inside. The atmosphere mellowed during breakfast. By the time John Thomas had 2 dishes of oatmeal, scrambled eggs and toast, and a pint of cocoa inside him, he was ready to concede that Chief Dressier had been doing his duty and probably didn't kick dogs for pleasure. In turn, the chief, under the influence of food, had decided there was nothing wrong with the boy that a firm hand and an occasional thrashing would not cure. Too bad his mother had to raise him alone. She seemed like a fine woman. He pursued a bit of egg with toast, captured it, and said, "I feel better, Mrs. Stewart, I really do. It's a treat to a widower to taste home cooking, but I won't dare tell my men." Mrs. Stewart put a hand to her mouth. "Oh, I forgot about them," she added. "I can have more coffee in a moment. How many are there?" "5, but don't bother, ma'am. They'll get breakfast when we go off duty." He returned to John Thomas. "Ready to go, young fellow?" He turned to his mother. "Why not fix breakfast for them, Mum? I've still got to wake Lummox and feed him." By the time Lummox had been wakened and fed, and had had matters explained to him, by the time 5 patrolmen had each enjoyed a second cup of coffee after a hot meal, the feeling was more that of a social event than an arrest. It was long past 7 before the procession was on the road. It was 9 o'clock before they got Lummox backed into the temporary cage outside the courthouse. Lummox had been delighted by the smell of steel and had wanted to stop and nibble it. John Thomas was forced to be firm. He went inside with Lummox and petted him and talked to him while the door was welded shut. He had been worried when he saw the massive steel cage, for he had never got around to telling Chief Dressier that steel was less than useless against Lummox. Now it seemed too late, especially as the chief was proud of the pen. There had been no time to pour a foundation, so the chief had ordered an open-work box of steel girders, top, bottom, and sides, with one end left open until Lummox could be shut in. Well, thought John Thomas, they all knew so much, and they didn't bother to ask me. He decided simply to warn Lummox not to eat a bite of the cage under threat of dire punishment, and hope for the best. Lummox was inclined to argue. From his point of view, it was as silly as attempting to pen a hungry boy by stacking pies around him. One of the workmen paused, lowered his welding torch, and said, "You know, it sounded just like that critter was talking." "He was," John Thomas answered briefly. "Oh." The man looked at Lummox, then went back to work. Human speech on the part of extraterrestrials was no novelty, especially on stereo programs. The man seemed satisfied, but shortly he paused again. "I don't hold with animals talking," he announced. John Thomas did not answer. It did not seem to be a remark to which an answer could be made. Now that he had time, John Thomas was anxious to examine something on Lummox which had been worrying him. He had first noticed the symptoms on the morning following Lummox's disastrous stroll. 2 swellings located where Lummox's shoulders would have been had he been so equipped. Yesterday they had seemed larger, which disturbed him, for he had hoped they were just bruises. Not that Lummox bruised easily. But they fretted him. It seemed possible that Lummox had hurt himself during the accidental gymkhana he had taken part in. The shot that Mr. Ito had taken at him had not damaged him. There had been a slight powder burn where the explosive charge had struck him, but that was all. The charge that could destroy a tank was to Lummox about like a hearty kick to a mule, startling but not harmful. Lummox might have bruised himself in plunging through the greenhouses, but that seemed unlikely. More probably he'd been hurt in falling off the viaduct. John Thomas knew that such a fall would kill any earth animal big enough to have an unfavorable cube-square ratio, such as an elephant. Of course, Lummox, with his unearthly body chemistry, was not nearly as fragile as an elephant. Still, he might have bruised himself badly. Dog take it, the swellings were bigger than ever, real tumors now, and the hide over them seemed softer and thinner, not quite the armor that encased Lummox elsewhere. John Thomas wondered if a person like Lummox could get cancer, say, from a bruise. He did not know, and he did not know anyone who would. Lummox had never been ill as far back as John Thomas could remember, nor had his father ever mentioned Lummox having anything wrong with him. Lummox was the same today, yesterday, and always, except that he kept getting bigger. He would have to look over his grandfather's diary tonight and his great-grandfather's notes. Maybe he had missed something. He pressed one of the swellings, trying to dig his fingers in. Lummox stirred restlessly. John Thomas stopped and said anxiously, "Does that hurt?" "No," the childish voice answered. "It tickles." The answer did not reassure him. He knew that Lummox was ticklish, but it usually took something like a pickaxe to accomplish it. The swellings must be very sensitive. He was about to investigate further when he was hailed from behind. "John! Johnny!" He turned. Betty Sorensen was outside the cage. "Hi, Slugger," he called to her. "You got my message?" "Yes, but not until after 8 o'clock. You know the dorm rules. Hi, Lummox. How's my baby?" "Fine," said Lummox. "That's why I recorded," John Thomas answered. "The idiots rousted me out of bed before daylight. Silly. Do you good to see a sunrise. But what is all this rush? I thought the hearing was next week." "It was supposed to be, but some heavyweight from the Department of Space is coming out from Capitol. He's going to try it." "What?" "What's the matter?" "The matter? Why, everything. I don't know this man from Capitol. I thought I was going to deal with Judge O'Farrell. I know what makes him tick. This new judge, well, I don't know. In the second place, I've got ideas I haven't had time to work out yet." She frowned. "We'll have to get a postponement." "What for?" asked John Thomas. "Why don't we just go into the court and tell the truth?" "Johnny, you're hopeless. If that was all there was to it, there wouldn't be any courts." "Maybe that would be an improvement. But look, knothead, don't stand there making silly noises. If we have to appear in less than an hour," she glanced up at the clock tower on the ancient courthouse, "a good deal less, we've got to move fast. At the very least, we've got to get that homestead claim recorded." "That's silly. They won't take it, I tell you. We can't homestead Lummox. He's not a piece of land." "A man can homestead a cow, 2 horses, a dozen pigs. A carpenter can homestead his tools. An actress can homestead her wardrobe." "But that's not homesteading. I took the same course in commercial law that you did. They'll laugh at you. Don't quibble. It's Section 2 of the same law. If you were exhibiting Lummy in a carnival, he'd be the tools of your trade, wouldn't he? It's up to them to prove he isn't. The thing is to register Lummox as exempt from lien before somebody gets a judgment against you." "If they can't collect from me, they'll collect from my mother." "No, they won't. I checked that. Since your father put the money in a trust, legally she hasn't got a dime." "Is that the law?" he asked doubtfully. "Oh, hurry up. The law's whatever you convince a court it is." "Betty, you've got a twisted mind." He slid out between the bars, turned, and said, "Lummy, I'll only be gone a minute. You stay right here." "Why?" asked Lummy. "Never mind why. You wait for me here." "All right." There was a crowd in the courthouse lawn. people gawping at Lummox in his new notoriety. Chief Dressier had ordered rope barriers erected, and a couple of his men were present to see that they were respected. The two young people ducked under the ropes and pushed through the crowd to the courtyard steps. The court clerk's office was on the second floor. There they found his chief deputy, an elderly maiden lady. Miss Schreiber took the same view of registering Lummox as free from judgment that John Thomas did. But Betty pointed out that it was not up to the county clerk to decide what was an eligible chattel under the law, and cited an entirely fictitious case about a man who homesteaded a multiple echo. Miss Schreiber reluctantly filled out the forms, accepted the modest fee, and gave them a certified copy. It was almost 10 o'clock. John Thomas hurried out and started downstairs. He stopped when he saw that Betty had paused at a penny weighing machine. "Come on, Betty," he demanded. "This is no time for that." "I'm not weighing myself," she answered while staring into the mirror attached to it. "I'm checking my makeup. I've got to look my best." "You look all right." "Why, Johnny, what a compliment." "It wasn't a compliment. Hurry up. I've got to tell Lummox something." "Throttle back and hold at 10,000. I'll bring you in." She wiped off her eyebrows, painted them back in smart Madame Satan pattern, and decided that it made her look older. She considered adding a rolling dice design on her right cheek, but skipped it as Johnny was about to boil over. They hurried down and outdoors. More moments were wasted convincing a policeman that they belonged inside the barrier. Johnny saw that two men were standing by Lummox's cage. He broke into a run. "Hey, you two, get away from there!" Judge O'Farrell turned around and blinked. "What's your interest, young man?" The other man turned, but said nothing. "Me? Why, I'm his owner. He's not used to strangers, so go back to the rope, will you?" He turned to Lummox. "It's all right, baby. Johnny's here." "Howdy, Judge." "Oh, hello, Betty." The judge turned to look at her as if trying to decide why she was present, then turned to John Thomas. "You must be the steward boy. I'm Judge O'Farrell." "Oh, excuse me, Judge," John Thomas answered, his ears turning pink. "I thought you were a sightseer." "A natural error. Mr. Greenberg, this is the Stewart boy, John Thomas Stewart. Young man, this is the Honorable Sergei Greenberg, Special Commissioner for the Department of Spatial Affairs." He looked around. "Oh, yes, this is Miss Betty Sorensen. Betty, why have you done those silly things to your face?" She ignored him with dignity. "Honored to meet you, Mr. Commissioner." "Just Mr. Greenberg, please, Miss Sorensen." Greenberg turned to Johnny. "Any relation to the John Thomas Stewart?" "I'm John Thomas Stewart the 11th, Johnny answered simply. "I suppose you mean my great-great-great-grandfather." "I guess that would be it. I was born on Mars, almost within sight of his statue. I had no idea your family was mixed up in this. Perhaps we can have a gab about Martian history later." "I've never been to Mars," Johnny admitted. "No? That's surprising, but you're young yet." Betty listened, ears almost twitching, and decided that this judge, if that was what he was, would be an even softer mark than Judge O'Farrell. It was hard to remember that Johnny's name meant anything special, especially since it didn't, not around Westville. Greenberg went on, "You've made me lose 2 bets, Mr. Stewart." "Sir?" "I thought this creature would prove not to be from out there. I was wrong. That big fellow is certainly not native to Earth. But I was equally sure that if he was E.T., I could attribute him. I'm not an exotic zoologist, but in my business one has to keep skimming such things, look at the pictures at least. But I'm stumped. What is he, and where is he from?" Why, he's just Lummox. That's what we call him. My great-grandfather brought him back in the Trailblazer, her second trip." "That long ago, eh? Well, that clears up some of the mystery. That was before Depth Space kept records. In fact, before there was such a department. But I still don't see how this fellow could have missed making a splash in the history books. I've read about the Trailblazer, and I remember she brought back many exotica. But I don't remember this fellow, and after all, extraterrestrials were news in those days." "Oh, that. Well, sir, the captain didn't know Lummox was aboard. Great-granddad brought him aboard in his jump bag and sneaked him off the ship the same way." "In his jump bag?" Greenberg stared at Lummox's outsized figure. "Yes, sir. Of course, Lummy was smaller then." "So I am forced to believe." "I've got pictures of him. He was about the size of a collie pup. More legs, of course." Yes, more legs. and he puts me more in mind of a triceratops than a collie. Isn't he expensive to feed? Oh, no, Lummy eats anything. Well, almost anything, John Thomas amended hastily, glancing self-consciously at the steel bars. Or he can go without eating for a long time, can't you, Lummy? Lummox had been lying with his legs retracted, exhibiting the timeless patience which he could muster when necessary. He was listening to his chum and Mr. Greenberg while keeping an eye on Betty and the judge. He now opened his enormous mouth. Yes, but I don't like it. Mr. Greenberg raised his eyebrows and said, I hadn't realized he was a speech center type. A what? Oh, sure, Lummy's been talking since my father was a boy. He just sort of picked it up. I meant to introduce you. Here, Lummy, I want you to meet Mr. Commissioner Greenberg. Lummox looked at Greenberg without interest and said, How do you do, Mr. Commissioner Greenberg? Saying the formula phrase clearly, but not doing so well on the name and title. How do you do, Lummox? He was staring at Lummox when the court clock sounded the hour. Judge O'Farrell turned and spoke to him. 10 o'clock, Mr. Commissioner. I suppose we'd better get started. No hurry, Greenberg answered absent-mindedly, since the party can't start until we get there. I'm interested in this line of investigation. Mr. Stewart, what is Lummox's RIQ on the human scale? Huh? Oh, his relative intelligence quotient? I don't know, sir. Good gracious, hasn't anyone ever tried to find out? Well, no, sir. I mean, yes, sir, somebody did run some tests on him back in my grandfather's time, but Granddad got so sore over the way they were treating Lummy, he chucked them out. Since then, we've kept strangers away from Lummy, mostly. But he's real bright. Try him. Judge O'Farrell whispered to Greenberg, The brute is as bright as a good bird dog, even if he can parrot human speech a little, I know. John Thomas said indignantly, I heard that, Judge. You're just prejudiced. The judge started to answer, but Betty cut across him. Johnny, you know what I told you. I'll do the talking. Greenberg ignored the interruption. Has any attempt been made to learn his language? Sir? Apparently not. And he may have been brought here before he was old enough to talk, his own language, I mean. But he must have had one. It's a truism among Xenists that speech centers are found only in nervous systems that use them. That is to say, he could not have learned human speech as speech, even poorly, unless his own breed used oral communication. Can he write? How could he, sir? He doesn't have hands. Yes. Well, taking a running jump with the aid of theory, I'll bet on a relative score of less than 40, then. Xenologists have found that high types, equivalent to humans, always have 3 characteristics: speech centers, manipulation, and from those 2, record keeping. So we can assume that Lummox's breed was left at the post. Studied any xenology? Not much, sir, John Thomas admitted shyly, except books I could find in the library, but I mean to major in xenology and exotic biology in college. Good for you. It's a wide-open field. You'd be surprised how difficult it is to hire enough xenists just for depth space. But my reason for asking was this. As you know, the department has intervened in this case, because of him. Greenberg gestured at Lummox. There was a chance that your pet might be of a race having treaty rights with us. Once or twice, strange as it may seem, a foreigner visiting this planet has been mistaken for a wild animal with, shall we say, unfortunate results. Greenberg frowned, recalling the terrible, hushed-up occasion when a member of the official family of the ambassador from Yador had been found dead and stuffed in a curiosity shop in the Virgin Islands. But no hazard exists here. Oh, I guess not, sir. Lummox is, well, he's just a member of our family. Precisely. The commissioner spoke to Judge O'Farrell. May I consult you a moment, Judge, privately? Certainly, sir. The men moved away. Betty joined John Thomas. It's a cinch, she whispered, if you can keep from making more breaks. What did I do? He protested. And what makes you think it's going to be easy? It's obvious. He likes you. He likes Lummox. I don't see how that pays for the ground floor at the Bon Marché or all those lampposts. Just keep your blood pressure down and follow my lead. Before we're through, they'll be paying us. You'll see. A short distance away, Mr. Greenberg was saying to Judge O'Farrell, Judge, from what I have learned, it seems to me that the Department of Spatial Affairs should withdraw from this case. I don't follow you, sir. Let me explain. What I would like to do is to postpone the hearing 24 hours while I have my conclusions checked by the department. Then I can withdraw and let the local authorities handle it, meaning you, of course. Judge O'Farrell pursed his lips. I don't like last-minute postponements, Mr. Commissioner. It has always seemed unfair to me to order busy people to gather together to their expense and personal inconvenience, then tell them to come back another day. It doesn't have the flavor of justice. Greenberg frowned. True. Let me see if we can arrive at it another way. From what young Stewart tells me, I am certain that this case is not one calling for intervention under the Federation's xenic policies, even though the center of interest is extraterrestrial and therefore a legal cause for intervention if needed. Although the department has the power, that power is exercised only when necessary to avoid trouble with the governments of other planets. Earth has hundreds of thousands of ET animals. It has better than 30,000 non-human Xenians, either residents or visitors, having legal status under treaties as human, even though they are obviously non-human. Xenophobia being what it is, particularly in our cultural backwaters, no, I wasn't referring to Westville. Human nature being what it is, each of those foreigners is a potential source of trouble in our foreign relations. Forgive me for saying what you already know. It's necessary as a foundation. The department can't go around wiping the noses of all our xenic visitors, even those that have noses. We haven't the personnel and certainly not the inclination. If one of them gets into trouble, it is usually sufficient to advise the local magistrate of our treaty obligations to the Xenians' home planet. In rare cases, the department intervenes. This, in my opinion, is not such a case. In the first place, it seems that our friend Lummox here is an animal under the law, and was there any doubt? The judge asked, astonished. There might have been. That's why I'm here. But despite his limited ability to talk, his other limitations would keep such a breed from rising to a level when we would accept it as civilized. Therefore, he is an animal. Therefore, he has only the usual rights of animals under our humane laws. Therefore, the department will not concern itself. We'll find out more about the department's concerns, or lack thereof, next time.